Last night I heard strange noises inside my home. Seconds later, my daughter started screaming in terror from the hallway. I rushed to check every single room, then opened the security application. Every camera worked perfectly, except for the footage at 4:13 a.m. The screen was pure static. I couldn't recover that missing minute, so next morning I took the DVR to a data specialist. He successfully restored it. When it ended, he turned deathly pale. "Call the police immediately, right now. You are watching Dad's Revenge Stories, and I appreciate your presence more than you know. Let's connect. Leave a comment below with your city or country." Please note, to enhance the experience, some fictional details have been introduced. Any similarity to real names or settings is coincidental, but the warning remains highly valuable for your safety. I have lived in the same house on Crestwood Lane for 31 years. I know every sound it makes, the way the second floorboard in the hallway pops when the temperature drops below 50, the low groan the water heater gives around midnight, the particular rattle of the kitchen window when the Sacramento wind comes in from the north. After my wife Helen passed 8 years ago, those sounds became a kind of company. I stopped finding them lonely. I started finding them familiar. I had gone to bed around 10, which is late for me. I am 68 years old and spent 30 years delivering mail for the United States Postal Service, and my body still wakes before sunrise whether I want it to or not. So when sleep finally came that night, it came heavy. I was dreaming about nothing in particular, just the low, pleasant blur that comes when a man is truly tired, and then I wasn't dreaming anymore. Diane screamed. Not a startled sound. Not the kind of noise a person makes when they stub a toe in the dark or knock something off a shelf. This was a scream that came from somewhere deeper, raw, and cracked at the edges, the way a voice sounds when the body produces it, before the mind has finished deciding whether to. I was out of bed before I knew I was awake, my hand finding the nightstand lamp by memory, my feet already moving toward the door. "Diane." I called her name twice before I reached the hallway. "Diane, I'm coming." She was standing in the doorway of Rosie's room, with both hands pressed flat against the doorframe, like she needed it to hold her upright. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders. She was wearing the oversized University of Oregon sweatshirt she'd slept in since college, and she was shaking, not shivering, shaking the way a person shakes when their whole nervous system fires at once. "Dad." Her voice broke on the single syllable. "Dad." The door was open. I stepped past her into Rosie's room. My granddaughter was asleep in her bed, curled on her side with her small fists tucked under her chin, the pink blanket pulled up to her shoulders. The nightlight, shaped like a crescent moon, cast a pale yellow glow across the room. The window was shut. The closet door was closed. Nothing was out of place that I could see. "She's fine," I said immediately. "Rosie's fine, she's right here." "The door was open, Dad." Diane pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. Her eyes were filling fast. "I got up to use the bathroom and the door was standing open. I always close it. I always close it all the way." I looked at the door. It was a solid wood interior door, the kind that swings freely. If it had been left ajar, a draft could explain it. A settling house could explain it. 31 years of a foundation slowly shifting could explain it. But Diane was meticulous about that door. I had watched her close it every single night for the past 4 months, ever since Rosie had gone through a phase of wandering the hallway at 2 in the morning looking for her stuffed rabbit. I lifted Rosie gently, just enough to feel the warmth of her, the slight weight of a sleeping child. She stirred and made a small sound, but did not wake. I held her for a moment, before settling her back against the pillow. Then I did what 30 years of early morning roots had trained me to do. I went through the house, every room, every closet, the garage, the laundry room, the small bathroom off the kitchen that we never used. I checked every window latch and every door lock, working from the back of the house forward with the flashlight I kept in the kitchen drawer. Every lock was engaged. Every window was sealed. Nothing had been forced. Nothing appeared disturbed. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, listening to the house the way I had learned to listen to it over 31 years. The water heater groaned on schedule. The kitchen window rattled once in the wind. The second floorboard in the hallway was silent, which meant no weight had crossed it recently. Diane appeared in the kitchen doorway, Rosie now awake and riding on her hip, blinking slowly against the light. "Is someone here?" Diane asked. Her voice was steadier now, but her free hand gripped the door frame hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "No," I said. "Not anymore." The words came out before I had decided to say them. Diane stared at me. I opened the security camera application on my phone. We had installed the system 6 months earlier, 4 cameras covering the front porch, the driveway, the back patio, and the hallway outside Rosie's bedroom. All 4 showed green status lights. All 4 were online. I scrolled backward through the hallway footage. 4:11 a.m. The hallway was empty. 4:12 a.m. Empty. 4:13 a.m. Static. Gray noise, a low electronic hiss, nothing. 4:14 a.m. Empty hallway again. I played it 3 times. The same 60 seconds of nothing sitting in the middle of the footage like a hole cut clean through cloth. "What is that?" Diane asked, leaning over my shoulder. "Someone interrupted the recording," I said. Rosie reached up and patted Diane's cheek with one small hand, the way she did when she sensed her mother was upset. Diane caught the little hand and held it. We sat at the kitchen table until the sky outside the window went from black to gray to the pale orange of early morning. I made coffee and Diane drank half a cup without tasting it. Rosie fell back asleep in her mother's arms. I kept the flashlight on the table between us, which was unnecessary and probably foolish, but I felt better having it there. At 7 o'clock, I pulled the DVR unit from the cabinet beneath the television and set it on the counter. "I'm taking this to get looked at," I said. Diane looked up. "Today? Right now." I found my keys on the hook by the back door. "Diane, lock this door behind me. Don't open it for anyone until I call you." She started to say something and stopped. Then she looked down at Rosie sleeping against her chest, and whatever she had been about to argue dissolved. "Call me the second you know anything," she said. "I will." I backed out of the driveway as the sun was clearing the rooftops on Crestwood Lane. The neighborhood looked exactly as it always did, Mrs. Peterman watering her roses, the Hendersons' tabby cat, asleep on their porch railing, the familiar geometry of a quiet street beginning a quiet morning. Nothing about it looked wrong. That was the part I could not stop thinking about as I drove. The place was called Sierra Data Recovery, and I had driven past it 100 times without ever noticing it. A narrow storefront wedged between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation office on Sunrise Boulevard, with a hand-lettered sign in the window that read, "We recover what others can't." I had found it at a red light, searching on my phone with one hand, while the other gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The door chimed when I pushed it open. The shop smelled like electronics and burned coffee, and the overhead fluorescence gave everything a slightly greenish cast. A man in his mid-40s looked up from behind the counter. He had reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, a half-eaten granola bar beside his keyboard, and the particular kind of unhurried expression that belongs to people who are very good at solving problems that make other people panic. "Patrick Cole," he said, extending a hand. "What can I do for you?" I set the DVR unit on the counter and told him everything. The missing 60 seconds, my daughter's scream, the locked doors, the feeling I could not shake that something had been inside my house. Patrick listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. He turned the DVR over in his hands the way a doctor handles an X-ray, examining it from every angle before committing to an opinion. "This is a standard 8-channel residential unit," he said. "The gap you're describing, 60 seconds of static that doesn't happen randomly. These systems either record or they don't. A clean 60-second interruption means someone knew what they were doing." "Can you get it back?" I asked. "The footage." "I can try." He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "No promises. But leave it with me and come back in 2 hours." I drove to a diner 3 blocks away and ordered coffee. I didn't drink, and eggs I didn't eat. I sat in a corner booth and watched the morning traffic on Sunrise Boulevard and thought about 60 seconds. 1 minute. The length of a commercial break. The time it takes to walk from the back door of my house to Rosie's bedroom and back again. I had timed it once years ago for no particular reason. 4 minutes if you moved slowly. Less if you knew the layout. My phone buzzed at 8:47. Patrick's number. "Mr. Stafford, you should come back now." His voice told me everything before I walked through the door. He was standing at his workstation with his arms crossed and his granola bar untouched, watching the monitor, with an expression that had nothing casual left in it. "I recovered a portion," he said. "Not all of it, but enough." He pressed play. The timestamp read 4:13:07 a.m. The hallway outside Rosie's bedroom appeared in grainy black and white. For 2 seconds, nothing moved. Then the door to Rosie's room swung inward slowly, deliberately, the controlled movement of someone who had done this before and did not want to make noise. A figure stepped into the frame. I gripped the edge of the counter. I swung. The person was wearing dark clothing, a heavy jacket with a logo on the chest that the low resolution made impossible to read clearly. Work boots with thick soles, a baseball cap pulled low. They moved down the hallway, with their head down, face angled away from the camera, as though they knew exactly where it was pointed. They pushed open Rosie's door. They went inside. For 11 seconds, the camera showed only the empty hallway. Then the figure reappeared, pulling Rosie's door almost but not quite shut behind them, leaving it open by exactly the inch Diane had found it. They walked back toward the rear of the house at the same unhurried pace. The footage ended. Patrick reached over and paused the screen on the clearest frame the moment the figure had passed closest to the hallway camera. "The jacket," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Can you zoom in on the chest?" He enlarged the image. The logo resolved slowly, a circular patch, 2 crossed tools, the outline of lettering I couldn't fully make out. But the style was unmistakable. A work jacket. The kind a craftsman wears. The kind Owen Briggs wore every day he came to work on my back porch. The floor seemed to tilt slightly beneath me. "Mr. Stafford." Patrick's voice was careful. "I think you need to call the police." I made myself look at the screen for another 10 seconds. Made myself look at the boots, heavy-soled, dark leather, something about them nagging at the back of my mind that I couldn't name yet. Made myself look at the way the figure had moved. Unhurried. Familiar. Belonging. "Make me a copy," I said. "Everything you recovered, put it on a flash drive." "Already done." He slid a small drive across the counter. Then he looked at me the way people look at you when they want to say something, but aren't sure they should. Whoever that is, they've been in that house before. You can tell by the way they move. They weren't exploring. They knew where they were going. I picked up the flash drive and put it in my shirt pocket next to my heart, which was beating considerably faster than I would have liked. "How much do I owe you?" I asked. "Nothing," Patrick said. Just call the police. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 4 minutes before I trusted my hands enough to dial. Through the windshield, the morning sun was fully up now, bouncing hard off the hoods of passing cars on Sunrise Boulevard. Ordinary people driving to ordinary places on an ordinary Friday morning with no reason to think about 60 missing seconds or the way a stranger moves through a sleeping house like they own it. I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? My name is Eugene Stafford, I said. I need to report a home intrusion. I have video evidence, and I need someone to come to my house on Crestwood Lane right now. 2 sheriff's department vehicles pulled onto Crestwood Lane at 8 minutes past 9, and I watched them from the driveway with my arms crossed and the flash drive still in my shirt pocket. The neighbors would notice. They always did. Mrs. Peterman had already stopped pretending to water her roses and was standing openly at the edge of her property, one hand shading her eyes. The first deputy out of the lead vehicle was a woman compact and deliberate in her movements, with dark hair pulled back tight and a notepad already in her hand before she reached me. Her name tag read Solis. The deputy behind her was younger, barely 30, I guessed, and he hung back near the vehicles the way junior officers do when they're still learning where to put themselves. Mr. Stafford. Deputy Solis looked at me directly, not at the house, not at the neighbors, at me. Rita Solis, Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. Tell me what happened. I told her everything, starting with Diane's scream and ending with Patrick Cole's parking lot. She wrote steadily and did not interrupt once, which told me she was either very experienced or very disciplined, probably both. When I finished, she looked up from her notepad. The footage, you have it with you. I handed her the flash drive. Inside, Diane was sitting at the kitchen table with Rosie in her lap, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug she wasn't drinking from. When Solis and her partner came through the door, Diane looked up with the specific expression of someone who has been holding themselves together by effort alone and is not sure how much longer they can manage it. Solis connected the flash drive to a department tablet and played the recovered footage on the kitchen table between us. All 3 of us watched it twice. Rosie mercifully was occupied with a box of crayons and paid no attention. When the footage ended the second time, Diane pressed both hands flat on the table and pushed herself upright. That jacket, she said. Her voice was tight and controlled in a way that took obvious work. That looks like Owen's jacket. Does Owen Briggs have a key to this house? Solis asked. Yes. Diane's jaw tightened. I gave him one so he could come and go while he's working on the porch. He's been here 3 weeks. Solis made a note. And who else has a key? Me, I said. Diane. Owen. I paused. And Marcus Webb had one from when he and Diane were married. But Diane changed the locks after the divorce. Diane nodded firmly. I changed them myself, 8 months ago. Marcus does not have a key to this house. Solis looked between us. I'll need Owen Briggs's contact information, and Marcus Webb's. Owen didn't do this, Diane said immediately. The controlled voice cracked slightly at the edges. I know him. He wouldn't, he has no reason. Ma'am. Solis's tone was not unkind, but it was firm. Right now, I need to verify where everyone was last night. That's not an accusation. That's how this works. Diane pressed her lips together and gave Solis Owen's number without another word. But her hands, when she set down the coffee mug, were shaking badly enough that it rattled against the table. I walked Solis through the house myself, the same route I had taken at 4 a.m. Kitchen, laundry room, guest room, garage. She photographed every door lock, every window latch, the back door frame, the hallway outside Rosie's room. Her partner dusted the door handles for prints with the methodical patience of someone who already suspected they wouldn't find much. In Rosie's doorway, Solis paused and looked at the door handle for a long moment. No scratches on the lock, she said. No damage to the frame. Whoever came through this door used a key that fit. I know, I said. Mr. Stafford? She turned to face me. When you got up last night after your daughter woke you, you said you searched the house. Walk me through exactly how you did that. I described it: the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, the order of the rooms, the way I checked each window latch before moving to the next space. Solis nodded slowly. Did you tell anyone else about that, the flashlight, the order you searched in? No, I said. I told you just now. Before that, I only told Diane what I found, not how I found it. She wrote something down and underlined it. Before she left, she stood on my front porch and looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully read, something between professional caution and something more personal. Change your camera system password today, she said. Not tomorrow, today. And Mr. Stafford, don't call Owen Briggs to tell him we're looking into his whereabouts. Let us make that contact. You think he did it? I asked. I think 60 seconds of missing footage and an unlocked door tell me somebody did something, she said. Everything else I'm going to verify before I form an opinion. She started down the porch steps, then stopped. One more thing. Marcus Webb was the divorce amicable. I thought about the $50,000. About the way he had looked at Owen the one time they had been in the same room, like a man calculating a problem rather than meeting a person. No, I said. It was not. Solis nodded once and walked to her vehicle. I stood on the porch until both cars had turned off Crestwood Lane. Then I went inside, sat down across from Diane, and reached over to put my hand over hers. Her fingers were ice cold. Dad, she said quietly, what if it wasn't Owen? I looked at her. It wasn't Owen. How do you know? I thought about the boots in the footage, the way they had nagged at something in the back of my mind since the moment Patrick had zoomed in on them. Something about the soles, something about the way the leather caught the light. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I'm going to. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Owen Morning Jean. Heading over around 9 to finish the porch railing. Coffee on. I stared at the message for a long moment. A man who had spent the night at a hospital bedside asking if the coffee was on. I typed back, "Give me an hour, Owen." Something came up. After Solis left, I poured Diane's cold coffee down the drain and made a fresh pot. She took Rosie upstairs for a bath, and I sat alone at the kitchen table with my laptop open and the flash drive plugged in. I played the recovered footage again, and again, and a third time with the brightness on my screen turned all the way up. I was not looking at the figure's face. There was no face to see, just the bill of a dark baseball cap angled precisely away from the camera. I was not looking at the jacket, though I had already noted the logo patch on the chest, that the resolution refused to sharpen into anything readable. I was looking at the boots. Something about them had been pulling at me since Patrick's shop, the way a word sits on the tip of your tongue and refuses to come. I paused the footage on the clearest frame the moment the figure passed closest to the hallway camera and leaned in until my nose was 8 inches from the screen. The boots were dark brown leather. Heavy soles, reinforced toe cap, a stitched seam along the outer edge that caught the light in a particular way. Clean. Completely clean. No scuffs on the toe, no dried mud packed into the tread, no paint splatter or sawdust worked into the lace eyelets. The leather had the subtle sheen of something that had been conditioned recently, not the dull, scratched surface of boots that spent their days on job sites. I opened a new browser tab and searched heavy-duty work boots, brown leather, reinforced toe, clean condition brand. I spent 20 minutes going through results. Steel toe roofing boots, electrical hazard boots, logging boots. I was about to give up when a sponsored result stopped me, a brand called Thorogood, their American Heritage line retailing at $420 a pair. The profile of the boot in the product photo matched what I had seen in the footage closely enough to make me sit very still. I looked at that price again. $420. Owen Briggs drove a 2009 Ford Ranger with a cracked passenger side mirror that he'd been meaning to replace for 2 years. He brought his lunch in a paper bag. He had once told me while sanding a porch beam that he'd gotten his current work boots at Home Depot on a Tuesday because they were 30% off and he had a coupon. I was still looking at the Thorogood website when I heard his truck in the driveway. Owen knocked twice and came through the back door the way he always did, ducking slightly out of habit, even though the frame cleared his 6'2" frame by a full 3 inches. He was wearing his canvas work jacket, faded green, the logo of a Sacramento building supply company, cracked and peeling on the left chest, and he pulled off his baseball cap when he came inside, which he always did. "Morning," he said. Then he looked at my face and stopped. "What happened?" "Sit down, Owen." He sat. I poured him coffee without asking and set it in front of him. He wrapped both hands around the mug, big hands scarred across the knuckles from years of rough work, the kind of hands that told you exactly what kind of life a man had lived. "There was an incident last night," I said. "Someone came into the house." Owen set the mug down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. "What is Diane okay? Is Rosie? They're fine. Everyone is fine." I held up a hand. "But the sheriff's department is going to be in touch with you today. I need you to answer their questions honestly and completely." He stared at me. "Gene, you can't think I had anything to do with—" "I don't," I said, and I meant it. But I needed to check one thing. "Owen, look down at your feet." He looked down, confused. His boots were visible beneath the table, the same pair he had been wearing every day for 3 weeks, battered tan leather, with the left toe worn down to a lighter color, a rust-colored stain on the right instep that I was fairly certain was deck sealant from 10 days ago. "How much did those run you?" I asked. He blinked at me. "My boots. Humor me. $62, he said slowly. "Home Depot, last spring." He paused. "Gene, why are you asking me about my boots?" I turned the laptop around and showed him the paused footage. He leaned forward, studied it for a long moment, and then something moved across his face, confusion. First, then a cold kind of clarity. "That's not my jacket," he said. "I know. The logo's wrong. Mine says Central Valley Supply. That one," he squinted. "I can't read it, but the shape is different. And those boots." He shook his head slowly. "Those are not $60 boots. Those are somebody's idea of what a working man looks like." That was exactly what I had been thinking, and hearing Owen say it out loud settled something in my chest. I called solace while Owen was still sitting at the table. "The boots in the footage," I said when she picked up. "I've been looking at them. They're high-end Rita. $400, maybe more. Thorogood Heritage Line or something similar. Owen Briggs buys his work boots on sale at Home Depot. I'm looking at his feet right now." There was a brief silence on her end. "Hold on." I heard papers moving. "Mr. Stafford, I was about to call you. Owen Briggs's alibi checked out 40 minutes ago. He was at St. Francis Medical Center from 9:15 p.m. until 6 a.m. His mother had a stroke. We have him on 3 separate hospital cameras." I let out a breath I had been holding since 4:13 that morning. Across the table, Owen was watching my face with his hands flat on the table and his coffee going cold in front of him. I lowered the phone. "Your mother," I said. "Is she going to be okay?" His jaw tightened. "They think so. She's stable this morning." He paused. "Gene, if it wasn't me, then who was wearing my jacket?" It wasn't his jacket. It was a costume. Someone had studied Owen Briggs, his clothes, his work, his access to this house, and had built a version of him designed to be seen on a security camera. Someone who had paid $400 for boots to play the role of a man who spent 62. That, I said quietly, is exactly the right question. Owen left around 11 after I made him eat a sandwich he didn't ask for and drink a second cup of coffee he didn't need. He offered to stay. I told him to go check on his mother. He stood at the back door for a moment, with his cap in his hands, turning it in slow circles, the way men do when they want to say something and can't find the shape of it. "Jean," he finally said, "whatever this is, I want you to know I'm not going anywhere." "I know that," I said. "Go see your mother, Owen." After he left, the house felt very quiet. Diane had come downstairs while Owen and I were talking, listened from the doorway long enough to understand that Owen was cleared, and then taken Rosie to the backyard without a word. Through the kitchen window, I could see them, Rosie crouched over something in the grass, probably a bug, and Diane sitting on the porch steps Owen had rebuilt 3 weeks ago, her arms wrapped around her knees. I watched them for a minute. Then I picked up my keys. Beverly Holt had lived across the street from me for 19 years. She was 63, a retired school librarian, with a talent for crossword puzzles and an unfortunate habit of keeping her porch light on all night, which had taken me the better part of a decade to stop noticing. She was the kind of neighbor who brought soup when you were sick and remembered your wife's birthday even after your wife was gone. I trusted her the way you trust someone whose small daily kindnesses have accumulated into something solid over 2 decades. She was deadheading her roses when I crossed the street, and she looked up with the expression of someone who had been expecting me. "I heard the sheriff's cars this morning," she said before I could open my mouth. "Come sit down and tell me what's happening." We sat on her porch in the 2 wicker chairs she kept there year-round. She poured iced tea from a pitcher on the side table without asking whether I wanted any. I told her the short version, an intruder, the missing footage, the investigation. I left out the specifics about Owen and the boots. When I finished, she set her glass down and folded her hands in her lap. "I didn't want to bother you," she said carefully. "I wasn't sure it meant anything." I looked at her. "Tell me." She took a breath. "There's been a car. A dark sedan, very clean, the kind of car that looks like it gets washed twice a week. It started about 3 weeks ago. It parks down at the end of the block near the empty lot, not in front of your house or anyone else's. Always after midnight. Always with the headlights off. 3 weeks ago. Owen had started on the porch 4 weeks ago. Someone had been watching the house almost from the beginning." "How many times?" I asked. "That I saw 4, maybe 5. I'm up a lot at night." She said it without embarrassment, the casual admission of a woman who had long since made peace with her own insomnia. "My bedroom window faces the street. The 3rd time I saw it, I started paying attention." "Did you see the driver?" Beverly pressed her lips together slightly, the way people do when they're deciding how certain they are about something. "Once. He got out to, I think he was checking something on his phone or maybe just stretching. He stood beside the car for maybe 2 minutes." She paused. "He was wearing sunglasses." "At midnight," I said. I thought it was strange too. Wide frames. Gold-colored. She touched the side of her own face to indicate where the frames had sat. "The kind of glasses that are meant to be noticed. You know the type." I knew exactly the type. Marcus Webb had owned a pair of oversized gold-framed aviator sunglasses since the day I met him 8 years ago. He wore them in December. He wore them to Rosie's christening. He wore them in photographs taken indoors. They were as much a part of him as his pressed shirts and his too firm handshake. I kept my voice even. "The car, what kind?" "Something German, I think. Dark gray or black. It had one of those hood ornaments." She drew a circle in the air with one finger. A circle. Mercedes. Marcus drove a charcoal gray Mercedes E-Class that he had leased 2 years ago, 6 months before the divorce, on money I was fairly certain had come from the $50,000 he had taken from me. I was still processing that when I heard footsteps on the sidewalk and looked up to see Carla Navarro coming back from her evening walk, earbuds around her neck and a water bottle in her hand. Carla was 61, my colleague for 11 years at the Sacramento Postal District, before we both retired, and she lived 3 houses down in the tan ranch house with the American flag mailbox. She slowed when she saw us. "Everything okay? I saw the sheriff's cars this morning." "Come sit for a minute, Carla," Beverly said. Carla took the porch step, and I asked her the same question I had asked Beverly. Her answer came faster. "The dark Mercedes." She nodded immediately. "I've seen it 3 times on my morning walk. Always parked near the empty lot, and always, this is what I noticed, always facing your house, Jean. Not the street. Your house." She took a sip of water. "And the driver never got out while I was walking by, just sat there. Once I deliberately slowed down to see if he'd move, and he didn't. He just waited until I passed. 30 minutes of sitting in a parked car in the dark, watching a house. Not the behavior of someone who happened to be in the neighborhood. The behavior of someone running a surveillance operation on a residential street in Sacramento, California, with the patience of a man who believed he had all the time in the world. I thanked both of them, crossed back over to my house, and sat in my truck in the driveway for a few minutes, without starting the engine. In my shirt pocket, my phone felt very heavy. I had Marcus Webb's number saved under a contact name I had never bothered to change, Marcus Diane's husband. I hadn't updated it after the divorce. I stared at the windshield. The afternoon light was flattening out into that long California gold that comes in the hour before sunset. And Crestwood Lane looked exactly the way it always did, patient, quiet, oblivious. I had spent 30 years delivering mail to houses like these. I knew what the outside of a life looked like. I had learned a long time ago that the outside and the inside were almost never the same. I took out my phone. I did not call Solis yet. I pulled up Marcus's number, and I looked at it for a long time. Tomorrow, I told myself. Call Solis tonight. Call Marcus tomorrow. Do it right. I went inside to make dinner for my daughter and my granddaughter, and I did not say a word about gold-framed sunglasses or German sedans or the particular patience of a man who parks in the dark and waits. I called Solis at 7:30 the next morning before the coffee finished brewing. I told her about the Mercedes, about Beverly's description of the gold-framed sunglasses, about Carla's account of the car always facing my house. She listened without interrupting the way she always did, and when I finished, there was a pause that felt like she was writing something down. "That's consistent with what we're developing on our end," she said. "Don't call Marcus Webb yet, Jean. Let us pull his vehicle registration first." "I understand," I said. I waited until 9 o'clock. Then I called Marcus anyway. I am not proud of that. Rita Solis was a professional doing her job correctly, and I had told her I understood, which was true. I did understand. I simply could not sit in my kitchen for another 3 hours listening to the refrigerator hum and watching Diane pretend to read a magazine she had not turned a page of in 40 minutes. Marcus picked up on the 3rd ring. "Jean." His voice was warm and easy, the particular warmth of a man who has practiced sounding pleased to hear from people. "This is a surprise. How are you doing?" "Getting by," I said. "You know how it is." "I do." A brief pause. "How's Diane? How's my little girl?" My little girl. Rosie was 4 years old and had not seen her father in 6 months by court arrangement and by Diane's choice both. I kept my voice level. "They're fine," I said. Listen, Marcus. The reason I'm calling, we had some trouble at the house. Night before last. Trouble. His tone shifted just enough, not alarm exactly. Something more careful. What kind of trouble? Someone got into the house, I said. While we were sleeping. Diane heard something. I went through the whole place, checked every room. Flashlight and everything, room by room. Whoever it was, they were gone by the time I got up. God, Jean. He exhaled. That's terrifying. Are you okay? Is Diane? We're fine. Shaken up, but fine. Did they take anything? No. Nothing missing. Another pause, slightly longer than the last. Have you talked to the police? They've been out. They're looking into it. I kept my tone easy, the way you keep your tone easy when you are paying very careful attention. It's one of those things you know. Hard to know what to make of it. Sure. He made a sympathetic sound. Well, you know what they say about these things. It's usually just some kid looking for an unlocked door. Probably got spooked and ran off. Probably, I said. Still. His voice settled into something almost paternal. I have to say, Jean, I know you. You probably did exactly what you always do in a situation like that, right? Grabbed the flashlight from that kitchen drawer and went room to room, made sure everything was locked up tight. The kitchen went very quiet around me. I had not told Marcus about the flashlight. I had not told anyone about the flashlight except Solis in this kitchen yesterday morning. I had not mentioned it to Beverly. I had not mentioned it to Carla. I had not even mentioned it to Diane in those terms. I had told her I searched the house, not how. The flashlight from that kitchen drawer. He knew which drawer. He knew exactly which drawer because he had lived in this house for 2 years during the marriage, and the flashlight had been in the same drawer the entire time. That was not remarkable. What was remarkable was that he had described my movements from that night with the casual confidence of a man recounting something he had watched. I made myself keep breathing at the same rate. I made myself wait exactly 2 seconds before responding, which is what a man does when he is simply agreeing with a reasonable observation. Something like that, I said. You know me. I do. He laughed, a short, easy laugh. Listen, Jean, you should think about a better security system. I know a guy who does residential installs, very reasonable rates. I'll text you his number. I appreciate that, I said. Hey, Marcus, where were you night before last? Just making conversation. Diane's been asking if people she knows are around in case she needs anything. The pause this time was exactly 1 beat too long. Home, he said. Quiet night. Early to bed, actually. Wasn't feeling great. Sure, I said. Feel better. You too, Jean. Give my love to Rosie. I ended the call and set the phone face down on the table. I sat with my hands flat on the surface for a moment, feeling the wood grain under my palms, the solid, ordinary realness of it. Then I picked the phone back up and called Solis. She answered on the first ring. Jean, I told you not to. He knew about the flashlight, I said. Silence. I never told anyone about the flashlight except you, I said. Not Diane, not Beverly, not Owen. I described searching the house, but I never said how. He described it back to me. The specific drawer it comes from. The room-by-room method. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Rita, he was there. He watched me do it. I heard her exhale slowly on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The professional calm was still there, but underneath it, something had sharpened considerably. Jean, I need you to listen to me very carefully, she said. Do not call him again. Do not go near him. Do not tell Diane what just happened until I have spoken with you in person. A brief pause. I'm pulling everything on Marcus Webb right now. Everything. And Jean, Another pause shorter. Change your Wi-Fi password. Today. All of your camera system passwords. Do it in the next 10 minutes. Why? I asked. Because a man who knows which drawer you keep your flashlight in, she said carefully, may know a great deal more about your house than you realize. I changed every password before she arrived. Solis arrived at the house 40 minutes after I called her, and she stayed for 2 hours. She walked through every room with me while I showed her which passwords I had changed and on which devices. She photographed the router, the camera base station, the smart doorbell panel. She was thorough in the way that people are thorough when they have realized a situation is larger than it first appeared. Before she left, she stood in the front hallway and looked at me with the directness I had come to expect from her. I want you to take Diane and Rosie somewhere else tonight, she said. A friend's house, a hotel somewhere Marcus doesn't know about. And the house, leave it exactly as it is. Don't move anything. Don't clean anything. Don't touch anything. You don't have to. She paused. We're going to need to go through it more carefully. But I want to do that with a warrant, and I want to do that right. Diane packed a bag for herself and Rosie that afternoon. She didn't argue about leaving, which told me she was more frightened than she was showing. She drove to her friend Paula's house in Elk Grove without telling anyone except me where she was going, and she texted me when she arrived. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner of Crestwood Lane, and then I went back inside. I had told Solis I would leave by evening. I intended to. But there were a few things of Rosie's I wanted to bring her her favorite storybook, the stuffed elephant she called Peanut, the particular brand of pull-up diapers that Diane always forgot to pack enough of. I moved through the house quietly, collecting things into a canvas tote bag, and I saved Rosie's room for last. The room still smelled like her. That powdery, faintly sweet smell that belongs to small children, and that I had never been able to identify as any specific product. It seemed to come from Rosie herself, from her hair and her skin, the way some people simply carry a particular warmth with them. I stood in the doorway for a moment before going in. I found the elephant under the bed. I found the storybook on the small shelf Owen had installed beside the window last week, still level despite the fresh paint. I was reaching for the bag of diapers on the changing table when I heard it. A sound. Small and irregular, not the steady mechanical tick of a clock keeping time, but something slightly off rhythm, a faint electronic stutter. Tick, tick, then a pause. Tick. I straightened up and stood still. The room had 2 clocks. A small digital one on the dresser that showed the time in soft green numbers, and the bear clock on the wall above the changing table, a round wooden clock with a carved bear face Roman numerals and 2 small ears at the top. Marcus had given it to Diane before Rosie was born, back when he was still the kind of man who gave thoughtful gifts. It had hung in this room for 4 years. The sound was coming from the bear clock. I pulled the changing table chair over and stood on it, bringing my face level with the clock. Up close, the irregular ticking was clearer, not the mainspring mechanism which ran smoothly and steadily, but something else beneath it. Something with a slightly different rhythm, like a second heartbeat running just out of sync with the first. I took the clock off the wall. It was heavier than I expected. I turned it over. The back panel was held by 4 small Phillips screws. I went to the garage for a screwdriver, moving quietly out of habit, and came back. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I removed the 4 screws and lifted the back panel away. The clock mechanism sat in the left half of the housing. In the right half, nestled against a thin sheet of black foam padding, was a device I had never seen in person, but recognized immediately from the shape of it. A small black rectangle roughly the size of a deck of cards, with a tiny glass lens, no larger than a shirt button, set into one face, and a green LED light, blinking in the slow, patient rhythm of something that has been running a long time. A camera, small enough to hide in a child's bedroom clock. blinking green, which meant it was active, which meant it was transmitting, which meant someone was watching this room right now. I put the back panel down on the changing table. I put the screwdriver beside it. I looked at the small green light blinking in the housing of a clock that Marcus Webb had placed on the wall of his daughter's bedroom 4 years ago in a house he had not lived in for 8 months, and I felt something move through me that was not quite any single emotion I could name. It was too cold for rage, too focused for grief. It was the feeling of a man who has been asking a question for 2 days and has just found the answer, and the answer is worse than any of the possibilities he had considered. I did not touch the device. I took 3 photographs of it with my phone. Then I called Dennis Calhoun. Dennis was 64, a retired IT network administrator who had worked for the Sacramento County School District for 27 years before his knees gave out and forced him into a desk job he refused to take. We had met at a postal retirees' lunch 7 years ago and discovered we lived 4 blocks apart and had opinions about coffee that were nearly identical. He had forgotten more about network infrastructure than most people ever learned. He picked up on the second ring. "Gene, what's up?" "Dennis," I said, "I need you here, right now, and bring your laptop." A pause. "How right now?" "I'm standing in my granddaughter's bedroom holding a live camera that someone hid inside a wall clock," I said. "That right now." He arrived in 11 minutes. I heard his car in the driveway before I heard him knock. He came through the back door I had left unlocked, followed the sound of my voice upstairs, and stopped in the doorway of Rosie's room with his laptop bag over one shoulder and his reading glasses already on. He looked at the clock housing on the changing table. He looked at the blinking green light. He looked at me. "How long has that clock been in this room?" he asked. 4 years, I said. Dennis set his laptop bag down very carefully, the way a man sets something down when he needs both hands free to think. "Gene," he said, "if that light is green, it's still sending." Before I reveal the shocking identity of the monster behind that hidden camera, I need to know you are standing strong with me. If you are still here, comment the word "watching" right now, so I know you've got my back. And please be advised, the rest of this story contains some dramatized elements and may not be entirely factual if you prefer not to listen to this type of content. You are welcome to turn off the video right here. Dennis did not touch the camera either. He stood at the changing table and studied it the way he used to study network diagrams, leaning in close, tilting his head slightly, his reading glasses catching the light from the window. Then he straightened up and opened his laptop on the floor beside the door where the signal from my Wi-Fi router was strongest. "Here is what I know already," he said, settling cross-legged on the carpet, with the ease of a man who spent decades crawling through server rooms. "This type of device connects to a local Wi-Fi network to transmit footage. That means it went through your router, and everything that goes through your router leaves a record." He looked up at me over his glasses. "Did you change the router password today like Solace told you?" "Yes," I said. "About 3 hours ago." He nodded slowly. "Good. That means it can't connect out anymore. But the connection history, every device that ever logged into your network, that's still in the router's internal log. We just need to read it." He talked while he worked, which I appreciated. Dennis had spent 27 years explaining technology to school administrators who had no interest in understanding it, and he had developed the particular gift of making complicated things sound like common sense. He accessed my router's administrative page through his browser, a process that took him about 45 seconds and would have taken me the better part of an afternoon. The screen filled with lines of text dates, times, device names. "Every device that connected to your network is listed here," he said. "Your phones, Diane's laptop, the smart TV, the camera system, and anything else that connected without you knowing about it." He scrolled slowly. There. He tapped the screen with one finger. I crouched beside him and looked. Among the familiar device names, Jean's iPhone, Diane's MacBook ring. Doorbell. There was an entry that read simply, Hidden Eye 7743. Connected 14 weeks ago. Last active 2 hours and 17 minutes ago. 2 hours and 17 minutes. While I had been standing in this room, taking photographs of the clock housing. That's the camera, Dennis said. Now I follow where it was sending. He opened a second window and typed for a few minutes. The camera connects to a cloud storage account. Think of it like a private mailbox on the internet. Footage gets sent there automatically, and whoever owns the account can watch it from anywhere. He paused. The account login was cached in the camera's memory. Whoever set this up didn't bother to clear it, which means they felt very comfortable, very certain they wouldn't be found. He typed another line of code and pressed enter. The screen returned a result. One line. An email address. mweb1979@gmail.com. I read it twice. Marcus Andrew Webb, born 1979. His email address was on the insurance documents he had helped me file 4 years ago on the Christmas cards he had sent before the divorce on the school enrollment forms for Rosie's preschool that he had offered to complete on Diane's behalf. You know this address, Dennis said. It was not a question. He had watched my face. Yes, I said. I know exactly whose address that is. Dennis closed the laptop and took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose the way he did when he was thinking through something he didn't like. The room was very quiet around us. Outside the window, the last of the afternoon light was going orange and long across the backyard, and I could see the fresh boards of the porch railing Owen had installed pale and clean against the older wood. Jean, Dennis said finally, this camera has been active for 14 weeks. Do you understand what that means? It means he's been watching this room for 3.5 months, I said. It means he watched everything that happened in this room for 3.5 months. Dennis looked at me steadily. Rosie sleeping. Diane putting her to bed. You reading to her? Everything. I stood up from my crouch and walked to the window. I needed to move. I needed to put some distance between myself and that blinking green light, even though Dennis had covered the camera with a folded piece of paper from his laptop bag, so it could no longer see the room. 3.5 months. Marcus had sat somewhere in his apartment, in that charcoal gray Mercedes, anywhere with a Wi-Fi connection, and watched his daughter's bedroom like it was a television program he had subscribed to. I'm calling Solace, I said. I'll print the logs, Dennis said. All of them. Every connection, every timestamp. She'll want the paper copies. I stepped into the hallway to make the call. Solace picked up before the second ring. He's been watching Rosie's room for 14 weeks, I said. Dennis traced the camera to a cloud account registered to Marcus Webb's personal email. We have the connection logs, timestamps, everything. A silence on her end that lasted long enough to tell me she was absorbing the full weight of what I had just said. Don't disconnect the camera, she said. Don't move it. I'm getting a warrant tonight, and I want everything exactly as it is. Her voice was controlled, but moving faster than usual. Jean, is Diane with you? She's at Paula's in Elk Grove. Good. Keep her there. A pause. Jean, I need to tell you something before you hear it another way. We ran Marcus's background this afternoon. He has a prior employment record we need to discuss. There's more to this man than we initially understood. Her tone was careful. Come to the substation tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Bring Dennis if he's willing. He'll be willing, I said. I went back into Rosie's room. Dennis had printed 4 pages of connection logs on his portable printer and was stacking them neatly on the changing table beside the clock housing. He looked up when I came in. Solus, he asked. 8 o'clock tomorrow, I said. She wants you there. Dennis nodded and began carefully labeling each page with a felt-tip pen date time device name in the precise handwriting of a man who had spent decades making sure records were readable by whoever came next. I stood in the doorway of my granddaughter's bedroom and looked at the covered camera and the printed logs and the bear clock housing with its 4 small screws lined up neatly on the changing table. 4 years that clock had been on this wall. 4 years of ordinary mornings and bedtime stories, and Rosie learning to walk and falling down and getting back up, all of it, watched by a man who had convinced himself he had the right to see it. "Dennis," I said. He looked up. "Thank you," I said, "for coming so fast." He capped his felt-tip pen. "Jean, you'd have done the same." He was right. I would have. That was the thing about the people you had known long enough. You didn't have to explain yourself to them, and they didn't have to explain themselves to you. You just showed up. The Sacramento County Sheriff's substation on Freeport Boulevard had the particular atmosphere of a place where bad news was delivered as a matter of routine fluorescent lights, institutional carpet, the color of old mustard, and a smell of burned coffee that no amount of ventilation had ever managed to fully address. Dennis and I arrived at 7:58. Solus was already there, standing in the hallway outside a small conference room, with a manila folder thick enough to suggest she had not slept much. She shook Dennis's hand, nodded at me, and led us inside without preamble. "I'm going to show you some things," she said, setting the folder on the table. "I need you to let me get through all of it before you respond. Can you do that?" I said yes. Dennis said nothing and opened his laptop, which was his version of the same answer. Solus pulled out the first document, a printed employment record. Marcus Webb worked for a residential real estate firm called Cornerstone Properties from 2009 to 2014. He was terminated in August of 2014. She laid it flat on the table. The reason listed on the termination form is misconduct, specifically installation of unauthorized recording devices in properties he was showing to clients. I looked at the termination form. The language was careful and corporate, the kind of wording that results from lawyers choosing each word to limit liability. But the meaning was clear enough. Marcus had hidden cameras in other people's homes before. He had done it professionally, systematically, over a period of years, and when he was caught, the company had quietly let him go rather than pursue criminal charges. "Why wasn't he prosecuted?" I asked. "The firm didn't want the publicity," Solus said. 3 of the homeowners settled civilly. None of them pressed criminal charges. She paused. "Jean, this is a pattern. Your house is not the first time he has done this. It is simply the first time someone has caught him." She pulled out a second document. This one had a court seal at the top, Sacramento County Superior Court Civil Division. A complaint filed by a neighbor named Raymond Ostrowski, alleging that Marcus had conducted surveillance of his property following a fence line dispute. The complaint had been settled out of court in 2019. "He doesn't stop," Dennis said quietly. It was the first thing he had said since we sat down. "No," Solus agreed. "He doesn't." Then she looked at me in the particular way people look at you when they are about to tell you something they wish they didn't have to. "There's a third matter," she said. "And this one is going to be harder to hear." She nodded toward the door, and a woman I hadn't noticed stepped in from the hallway, mid-40s, dark blazer, a leather portfolio under her arm. Solus introduced her as Andrea Marsh, an assistant district attorney assigned to financial crimes. Andrea Marsh set her portfolio on the table and removed a stapled document that I recognized immediately, even from across the table. The header read, "Revocable Living Trust, Eugene R. Stafford." My name, my signature on the last page in the blue ink of a pen I could no longer remember holding. Mr. Stafford, she said, do you recall signing this document approximately 4 years ago? Marcus brought it to me, I said. He said it was standard estate planning, protecting Rosie's future. I looked at my own signature. I trusted him. He was family. Andrea Marsh turned to page 7 and set the document in front of me. Her finger rested beside a clause I had never read carefully enough. The language was dense and technical, deliberately so, but the meaning that emerged from it was not complicated. If I died while Rosie was under the age of 25, the portion of my estate designated for her would be held in trust. The successor trustee, the person with legal authority to manage those funds until Rosie came of age, was named as Marcus Andrew Webb. I sat with that for a moment. Marcus had not simply installed a camera in Rosie's bedroom. He had also positioned himself through a document bearing my signature to control a significant portion of what I would leave my granddaughter. He had done both of these things while presenting himself as a devoted husband and son-in-law. He had done both of them quietly, patiently, and without anyone noticing. We're moving to have that clause invalidated, Andrea said. Given the circumstances, a judge will sign off on it quickly, but I wanted you to understand the full picture. I understand it, I said. My voice came out flat and even, which took more effort than it probably sounded. After Andrea left, Solis produced one final item, a USB drive containing 3 short video clips recovered from the hidden camera's memory card. She warned me before she played them. The first clip showed Diane singing to Rosie at bedtime, a soft, half-remembered song I recognized from when Diane herself was small. The second showed me sitting in the rocking chair, reading a picture book aloud, doing the different voices the way Rosie demanded, while she sat in my lap and turned the pages herself. The third clip showed an empty room. Then the door opened. Marcus stepped inside. He walked to the center of the room, looked slowly around at the walls, the crib, the bear clock on the wall above the changing table, and then he turned and looked directly into the camera lens, directly into it, with full knowledge of where it was because he had put it there himself. And he smiled a slow, private smile, the smile of a man standing in a room that he believes belongs to him in ways no one else can see. Solis stopped the clip. The room was very quiet. He went in while they were out, Dennis said. Yes, Solis said. I pushed back from the table and stood up. I walked to the window that looked out on Freeport Boulevard and watched the morning traffic for a minute without seeing any of it. Then I turned around. There is one more thing, I said. Something I forgot to mention yesterday. Solis looked at me. About a week before the intrusion, I said I received a phone call at 3 a.m. Unknown number. When I answered, there was no voice, just breathing. It lasted about 40 seconds, and then the line went dead. I reached into my jacket pocket and produced my phone. I recorded it. Old habit from the Postal Service, we were trained to document everything unusual. I set the phone on the table. I don't know if it means anything, but I kept it. Solis picked up the phone and listened to the recording with her head slightly bowed. When it finished, she replayed the first 10 seconds. Then she looked up. We'll have the audio analyzed, she said. Background noise can place a caller in a specific environment. She set the phone down carefully. Jean, you documented a 3 a.m. phone call from an unknown number on instinct recovered footage from a damaged DVR the morning after the intrusion, identified the boots in the video before we did, and traced the camera through your neighbor before our warrant came through. She looked at me steadily. You've been doing this correctly from the very beginning. I delivered mail for 30 years, I said. You learn to notice when something's out of place on a route. Dennis called me at 2 p.m. while I was driving back from the substation. I had left Solis with the recording and a printed copy of Dennis's router logs, and I had spent the drive trying to organize in my mind what I needed to tell Diane, and in what order. Some information lands differently depending on how it is delivered, and I wanted to get it right. Dennis did not give me the chance. "Pull over," he said when I answered. "I need you to not be driving when I tell you this." I pulled into the parking lot of a Walgreens on Stockton Boulevard. "Go ahead." "After you left this morning, I kept running analysis on the network data from your router," he said. "One of the other connected devices flagged something I almost missed. Diane's old phone number, the SIM she's been using since before the marriage. It's running a location sharing application in the background." I looked at the Walgreens storefront without seeing it. "A tracking app, a stalkerware app," Dennis said, and his voice carried the particular flatness of a man who is angry and choosing not to show it. "There's a difference. Regular location sharing, both people know about it. This type runs silently. The person being tracked has no idea it's there. Marcus would have installed it when he still had physical access to her phone, probably during the marriage, possibly right before the divorce was finalized." A pause. "Gene, he has known exactly where Diane and Rosie have been every single day for the past 8 months. Every park, every doctor's appointment, every time Diane had driven Rosie to the library or the grocery store or Paula's house in Elk Grove last night. Marcus had watched all of it on a screen somewhere, a blue dot moving through Sacramento, and Diane had never known." "Does Diane need to do anything to her phone?" I asked. "She needs to stop using that SIM immediately," Dennis said. "Today, I'll help her set up the new number." Another pause. "There's something else. While I was in the network logs, I found a second device that connected to your router briefly about 6 weeks ago. Only once for about 4 minutes. It was a tablet, and the only activity it showed was someone accessing Owen's Google business page." I went very still. "Marcus came to the house 6 weeks ago. Someone with that tablet did. For 4 minutes. Long enough to log into a fake Google account and post a 1-star review." I heard Dennis exhale. I pulled the review. It's still up. The language is vague enough to avoid a defamation claim on its face, but the implication is clear. It suggests Owen behaved inappropriately with a female client in her home. A pause. "Gene, he's been running a campaign. The camera, the tracking app, the review, these aren't separate incidents. This is a coordinated effort to isolate Diane. Destroy Owen's credibility, monitor her movements, watch her home. He's been building pressure from every direction at once." I sat in the Walgreens parking lot for a moment after Dennis finished. A woman pushed a cart past my window with a toddler riding in the basket, the child holding a box of crackers with both hands and looking at the world with the serene confidence of someone who expects everything to work out fine. I called Diane. She was at Paula's, and she answered on the first ring the way she had been answering every call since this began, with the slightly held breath of someone waiting for the next piece of bad news. "I need to come over," I said. "I have some things to tell you." Paula gave us the living room, and I sat across from Diane on a couch that was too soft and too low, and made me feel slightly ridiculous, which was not how I wanted to feel for this conversation. Rosie was in the backyard with Paula's golden retriever, visible through the sliding glass door, shrieking with delight every time the dog jumped for a tennis ball. I told Diane about the GPS app first, because I had learned a long time ago that the most important thing to say is rarely the one that comes most naturally. I watched her face as I explained what Dennis had found the silent application and running on her SIM, the 8 months of location data, every trip and errand and school run, tracked and recorded. She did not cry. She sat very straight on Paula's too soft couch and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face since she was 7 years old, and had come home from school to tell me that a girl in her class had been stealing her lunch every day for a month, and she had not told me because she did not want to make trouble. "He knew where I was," she said. "Every time." "Yes, She pressed both hands flat on her thighs and looked at the sliding glass door. Outside, Rosie had managed to get the tennis ball away from the dog and was now running in wide circles around the yard, laughing at the top of her lungs. "That morning, 3 weeks ago," Diane said slowly, "when I took Rosie to McKinley Park, and I thought I saw his car across the street." Her jaw tightened. "I told myself I was being paranoid." "You weren't paranoid," I said. "You were right." She turned back to me. Her eyes were dry and her voice was controlled, and the look on her face was something I had no good word for, grief and fury compressed into a very small space the way a fire gets hotter when you close the damper on it. "What else?" she said. I told her about the review. I watched her absorb it, the fake account. The implications about Owen, the 4 minutes Marcus had spent connected to our home network, to post it, the specific cruelty of targeting a man's livelihood because that man had made Diane smile. "I need to call Owen," she said. "I know." She took out her phone, then stopped. She looked at it the way you look at something ordinary that has become suddenly untrustworthy. "Is this phone safe to use?" "Dennis is coming over this evening to sort out the SIM situation," I said. "Use Paula's phone for now." She set her own phone on the coffee table, face down, with the deliberate care of someone setting down something they no longer want to touch, and reached for Paula's landline on the side table. She dialed Owen's number from memory, which told me something about how things stood between them that she had never directly said. Owen answered quickly. I could hear his voice, but not his words. I watched Diane's face as she explained what we had found, the review, the source. I watched the moment Owen understood, because her expression shifted when his did, the particular attunement of two people who have begun to read each other. "He heard you," she said when she hung up. He's not angry at me." "He has no reason to be angry at you," I said. She picked up Rosie's stuffed elephant from the cushion beside her Peanut, whom I had retrieved from the house the previous evening, and held it in her lap. "Dad," she said, "how long has he been planning this?" I thought about the trust document signed 4 years ago, the tracking app installed during the marriage, the camera placed in the clock before the divorce was final, the fake review posted 6 weeks ago, the boots and the jacket purchased and staged for a night that had been what I was increasingly certain rehearsed. "Long enough," I said, "that we are not going to underestimate him." Solis called at 7:15 the next morning. "We brought Marcus in for questioning last night," she said. "He came voluntarily, which was a surprise. His attorney arrived 20 minutes later, which was not." A brief pause. "I'd like you to come observe. You won't be in the room. There's a viewing area with a one-way window. You don't speak, you don't react in any way he could detect, and you leave when I tell you to leave." "I understand," I said. "Jean." Her tone sharpened slightly. "I mean it. Whatever he says in there, you hold it together." I told her I would. I meant it more than she probably believed. The viewing room was barely larger than a coat closet. 2 chairs, a small shelf bolted to the wall, and a window of dark glass that looked into the interview room at an angle. A deputy I didn't know handed me a paper cup of water I didn't drink, and positioned himself by the door in the particular way of someone whose job is to make sure you stay put. Marcus was already seated when I arrived. He looked exactly as he always had, pressed charcoal slacks, a light blue dress shirt with the collar open by one button, dark hair combed with the precision of someone who considers his appearance a professional matter. His gold-framed sunglasses were folded on the table beside him neatly, like a prop he had set down between acts. His attorney, a trim man in his 50s with a briefcase that cost more than my first car, sat to his left and slightly behind him. Marcus looked rested. That was the thing that hit me first through the dark glass from 8 feet away. He looked like a man who had slept well. Solis entered and sat across from him without pleasantries. She placed a manila folder on the table, opened it, and set a photograph in front of Marcus, a still frame from the hidden camera footage showing the device in its housing inside the bear clock. "Do you recognize this?" she asked. Marcus looked at the photograph with what appeared to be polite curiosity. "It looks like a recording device of some kind. It was found inside a clock that you gave to your daughter approximately 4 years ago. The clock was hanging in her bedroom." "Rosie's bedroom," Marcus said. Not a correction, a clarification. He wanted to say her name. "Yes, I gave Diane and Rosie a lot of things over the course of our marriage," he said. "I don't have a specific memory of every item." He glanced at his attorney, who gave no visible response. "I certainly didn't put any recording device inside a clock. The device transmitted footage to a cloud storage account registered to your email address," Solis said. "Accounts get compromised." He said it without any change in expression. "I've had my email hacked before. I reported it to Google." He folded his hands on the table. "I'd be happy to provide whatever documentation I have." Solis placed a second photograph on the table, a printout of the router connection log, with the hidden eye device entry highlighted. "This device connected to the Wi-Fi network at the Stafford residence on Crestwood Lane 14 weeks ago and remained active until 3 days ago. The connection was initiated using a network password that was changed 8 months ago." She looked at him. "How would an unauthorized device have obtained a current network password?" "I have no idea," Marcus said pleasantly. "That sounds like something your technical people should look into." His attorney leaned forward. "Deputy Solis, my client came here voluntarily as a courtesy. Unless you're prepared to charge him with something specific, I think we've been cooperative enough for one morning." Solis did not look at the attorney. She kept her eyes on Marcus. "Mr. Webb," she said, "tell me about your relationship with your daughter." Something shifted in Marcus's face, the first movement beneath the surface, like a current running under still water. He sat slightly straighter. "Rosie is my daughter," he said. "I love her. I have not been given adequate access to her since the divorce, which I consider a serious injustice that I intend to address through the appropriate legal channels." His voice had taken on a new quality, flatter, more deliberate, the quality of a man reciting a position rather than expressing a feeling. "Rosie deserves a father who is present in her life. She deserves stability. She deserves to be protected from influences that are not in her best interest." "What influences?" Solis asked. He looked at the one-way glass. I do not know if he could see me. The glass was designed to prevent exactly that. But he looked at it the way you look at a window when you believe something is on the other side, and he held the look for 3 full seconds before he turned back to Solis. "Her grandfather means well," he said. "But he is an old man with limited perspective. And Diane—" He paused. "Diane has made choices recently that concern me deeply. The man she has allowed into that house, into proximity with my daughter, Owen Briggs," Solis said. "I don't know him," Marcus said. The lie was smooth and immediate. "I only know what Rosie has mentioned during our calls. Children sense things. They communicate distress in ways adults miss if they're not paying attention." He tilted his head slightly. "I pay attention." The deputy beside me put a hand on my arm. I had not realized I had stood up. I sat back down. I put the paper cup of water on the shelf in front of me and kept both hands flat on my thighs, which was the only way I trusted them to stay still. Solis ended the interview 7 minutes later. Marcus's attorney stood first, gathered his briefcase with the unhurried confidence of a man billing by the hour, and said something quietly to Marcus that I couldn't hear through the glass. Marcus nodded, rose, and buttoned the top button of his shirt before leaving the room, a small, fastidious gesture, as though he were finishing a meeting that had simply run its natural course. In the hallway afterward, Solis stood with her notepad and looked at me. "He didn't give us anything admissible," I said. "No," she said. He's careful. He's been careful about this for a long time. She tapped her pen against the notepad. But he came in voluntarily, which tells me he wants to know what we have. And he looked at that glass, which tells me he wanted you to hear what he said about Rosie. I thought about the way he had said her name. Not as a father says a child's name. As a man says the name of something he believes he owns. Rita, I said. We are not going to get what we need sitting in interview rooms. She looked at me for a long moment. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, I said carefully, that Marcus Webb has been watching my house for 14 weeks because he believes no one is watching him. And I'm thinking the only way to catch a man like that is to let him believe he is still right. Solis was quiet for long enough that the hallway around us felt very still. If we do this, she said finally, it goes through me, every step. Nothing happens without my sign-off. Understood, I said, and Jean. She looked at me directly. You do not go near him. You do not speak to him. You do not make any decision in that house without my voice in your ear. Agreed, I said. She wrote something in her notepad, tore out the page, and handed it to me. On it were the words, Thursday night. Your house. We'll talk through the details tomorrow. I folded the paper and put it in my shirt pocket next to my heart, which had finally, for the first time in 4 days, found a steady rhythm. The meeting was at 10 o'clock Wednesday morning, in the same conference room where Solis had laid out Marcus's history 2 days earlier. The mustard-colored carpet looked exactly the same. The coffee smelled exactly as burned. This time there were more people around the table. Solis had brought 2 additional deputies, a heavy-set man named Reyes, who handled tactical logistics and said very little, and a younger woman named Tran, who managed surveillance equipment and said even less, but took notes with a speed that suggested she missed nothing. Dennis was there at my request, laptop already open, and at the far end of the table a man Solis introduced as Agent Paulson from the state's Organized Stalking and Cybercrimes Unit, who had driven up from Fresno that morning and looked like he had made the drive in under 2 hours. Solis opened the meeting without ceremony. Thursday night, she said. Here is what we know about Marcus Webb's pattern. He comes between 4 and 4:30 in the morning. He uses a key. He goes directly to Rosie's room and stays less than 15 minutes. He has done this at least twice that we can confirm the night of the intrusion, and based on the camera footage, at least one prior occasion, approximately 6 weeks ago. She looked around the table. He will come again. He believes the investigation has stalled. He believes Jean is an old man who got lucky once. He believes Diane and Rosie will settle back into their routine, and when they do, he will settle back into his. How do we make him believe that? I asked. We give him exactly what he's been watching for, Solis said. She turned to Dennis. Walk us through the GPS issue. Dennis cleared his throat. He had brought a printed diagram of the plan, which he slid across to Reyes and Tran. Marcus has been tracking Diane's location through the stalkerware on her SIM card. As of 3 days ago, Diane has switched to a new phone with a new number. But she still has the old phone with the compromised SIM. He tapped the diagram. Here's what we do. Thursday afternoon, Diane, Rosie, and Owen visibly move boxes and bags into Jean's house on Crestwood Lane. Neighbors see it. Beverly Holt sees it. It looks like the family is coming home. He paused. Then at 8 o'clock Thursday evening, Diane takes the old phone GPS still running and drives it to her friend Paula's house in Elk Grove. She leaves it there overnight. Marcus checks the tracker, sees Diane's location is in Elk Grove, concludes she left again. He thinks the house has only Jean in it. An old man, Reyes said without inflection. An old man he has underestimated from the beginning, I said. Reyes looked at me for a moment. Fair enough, he said. Solis took over. Jean stays in the house. No lights except what would normally be visible from outside at that hour. One lamp in the living room on a timer, the porch light. Thermal cameras cover every exterior entrance. Reyes and 2 additional deputies will be positioned in Beverly Holt's garage, and the Henderson side yard. Both neighbors have already been contacted and have agreed. She looked at me. Jean, you will have an earpiece. You will hear everything I say. You will do nothing without my instruction. If Marcus enters the house, you stay in the living room until I give you the word. Is that understood? Understood, I said. I want to be in the house, Diane said. Every head at the table turned. She was sitting beside me with her hands flat on the table and her chin level, which was the posture she had inherited from her mother, and which meant she had already decided and was not asking permission. Diane, I began. I know what you're going to say, Dad. She looked at Solis. He's been watching my daughter sleep for 3.5 months. He's been tracking my phone for 8 months. He posted lies about Owen to destroy his business. Her voice was absolutely steady. I am not sitting in Paula's living room watching television while this happens in my father's house. Solis studied her. You would need to leave before dark. You would not be in the house during the operation. I know that, and you understand that if something goes wrong, if Marcus detects the setup and doesn't enter or enters, and becomes unpredictable, the operation ends immediately. No heroics. Deputy Solis, Diane said. I spent 7 years married to this man. I know exactly how predictable he is when he believes no one is watching. Solis made a note. You help with the move-in Thursday afternoon. You leave at 8 with the old phone. You go to Paula's and you stay there until I call you. She looked at Diane. And you tell Owen what is happening, because if he shows up at that house Thursday night on his own initiative, it complicates everything. Owen will stay where I ask him to stay, Diane said. Agent Paulson, who had been quiet through all of this, spoke for the first time. The decoy, he said. For the crib. Solis nodded at Tron, who produced a photograph from her folder and passed it around the table. It showed a training doll used in infant CPR instruction, roughly the size of a 4-year-old, with a weighted body and soft features, dressed in a small set of pajamas, lying under a blanket. In low light. Tran said the first words she had spoken. At the distance between the doorway and the bed, it reads as a sleeping child. I looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then I passed it to Dennis without comment. After the meeting, Solis walked me to the parking lot. The morning was already warm, the particular dry Sacramento warmth that arrives in late spring and stays until October, and the sky was the hard, clear blue that makes the valley look like a painting of itself. Jean, she said at my truck, I need to ask you something directly. Go ahead. If Marcus comes through that door Thursday night, and I believe he will, and he says something about Rosie that makes you want to move before I give the signal. She looked at me. What are you going to do? I thought about the interview room, about the way Marcus had looked at the one-way glass and said the words limited perspective with the calm of a man describing a fact of nature. About Rosie in Paula's backyard running in circles after a tennis ball, wholly unaware that for 3.5 months, a man had been watching her sleep. I am going to stand exactly where you tell me to stand, I said, and I am going to wait for your word. She studied my face for a moment. Okay, she said. I believe you. I drove home the long way down Freeport and along the river road, the way I used to drive when Helen was alive, and we had something to talk through and needed the extra miles. I thought about Thursday. I thought about the training doll in its small pajamas. I thought about a man who had spent 14 weeks watching a child's bedroom and had convinced himself that what he was doing was love. When I got home, I sat on the front porch in the afternoon light and called Diane. "How are you holding up?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about the morning I took Rosie to McKinley Park," she said. "And I thought I saw his car, and I told myself I was imagining things." A pause. "I should have trusted myself." "You trust yourself now," I said. "I do." Another pause shorter. "Dad, is the porch railing level?" "The new one Owen put in." I looked at it. The pale new wood, the clean even line of it against the older boards. "It's perfect," I said. "Good." I heard her exhale. "He spent 2 extra hours on it to get it right. He didn't charge us for the time." I sat with that for a moment. A man who spent 2 unpaid hours making sure a porch railing was level, against a man who spent 14 weeks watching a child sleep. "Thursday," I said. "Thursday," Diane said. "I got home from the substation at noon and spent the afternoon doing ordinary things. I mowed the front lawn, which needed it, and which gave me something to do with my hands for 45 minutes. I pulled the dead heads off the rose bushes along the fence Helen had planted them, the spring before Diane was born, and I had kept them going for 31 years, with the kind of stubborn persistence that has less to do with gardening and more to do with not wanting to let something die that she had started. I swept the front porch, the new boards Owen had laid flush and clean the railing level to the last quarter inch. I made a grocery run and bought things I did not need: a box of the oatmeal Diane kept in the cabinet, a carton of apple juice for Rosie, a container of the coffee Dennis always reached for when he came over. I was stocking a house for people who were not in it. I did it anyway. By 4 o'clock, I had run out of ordinary things to do, and the house had gotten very quiet. I made dinner: a can of tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich, the meal I had made for myself on every difficult night for the past 8 years, ever since Helen died, and I discovered that some evenings called for something simple and warm that did not require decisions. I ate at the kitchen table with the small television on the counter turned to the local news, not listening to it, just for the company of voices. Afterward, I washed the bowl and the pan and the single plate and put them away and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard in the early evening light. Owen had stacked the leftover lumber from the porch project neatly along the fence, 12 boards squared up and covered with a tarp against the rain that the forecast promised by the weekend. He had done that without being asked. That was the kind of man he was. I went into the living room and sat in the armchair by the window, Helen's chair technically, though she had always called it mine. We had argued about that chair for 22 years, in the particular comfortable way that couples argue about things that do not actually matter. I had stopped sitting in it for about 2 years after she died. Then one afternoon, I had simply sat down in it without thinking, and it had felt like exactly the right place to be. I sat there now and looked at the room. 31 years of a life made visible the bookshelf Diane had painted blue when she was 14, and then been embarrassed about by 15, which I had never repainted because I liked it. The framed map of Sacramento from 1952 that Helen had found at an estate sale and insisted was art, which it possibly was. The small table beside the front door, where the mail accumulated bills and catalogs, and the occasional card, the whole daily ordinary sedimentation of a life in one place. Marcus had watched this house for 14 weeks. He had watched the mail accumulate on that table. He had watched me read in this chair. He had watched Diane bring Rosie downstairs in the mornings. He had watched all of it through a lens the size of a shirt button from a clock on a child's bedroom wall. I did not spend a long time thinking about that. There was nothing useful in it. My phone buzzed at 7:45. A text from Diane's new number. She had attached only a photograph. Rosie sitting in Paula's backyard, in the last of the evening light, wearing her orange pajamas, with the small white stars, holding a dandelion up to her face and blowing it with enormous concentration. The seeds were caught mid-flight, in the image a small white explosion above a 4-year-old's serious face. I looked at that photograph for a long time. Then I texted back, "Sleep well, sweetheart. Both of you." Her reply came in seconds. A string of emojis, a flower, a moon, a heart. Then, after a pause, a second message in Diane's voice. "The railing is perfect, by the way." Rosie kept running her hand along it when we were doing the move-in this afternoon. She does that when she likes something. I put the phone down on the arm of the chair and looked at the dark window. 8:17. The street outside was quiet, the Petersons' porch light on the Hendersons' living room flickering with television light. Beverly's window upstairs, dark, which meant she had gone to bed early or was lying in the dark listening to the neighborhood the way she did sometimes. Tomorrow night, Beverly's garage would hold 2 deputies and a thermal camera. I went through the house one more time before bed, not the urgent room-by-room search of 6 days ago, but a slower walk, the kind you take when you want to remember what a place looks like in its ordinary state. The hallway with the family photographs, the second floorboard, that still popped when the temperature dropped. Rosie's room, repainted last year, in a soft yellow that Diane had chosen from 47 paint chips, freshed and changed a wall art, now the bear clock gone, and the small round mark on the wall where it had hung for 4 years. The training doll was already in position in Rosie's bed, dressed in a set of Rosie's spare pajamas, covered to the shoulder with the pink blanket. In the low light from the hallway, it was convincing enough that I stopped in the doorway and felt my chest tighten for a single irrational second before I remembered. I turned off the hallway light and stood in the dark for a moment. Phew. The house made its sounds around me, the water heater's low groan, the kitchen window rattling in the evening wind off the valley, the second floorboard settling in the cool night air. Every sound I had learned over 31 years. Every sound that belonged. Helen had loved this house. She had loved the creaky floorboard and the leaning mailbox and the rose bushes that needed more attention than either of us properly gave them. She had said once early on that a house that made noise was a house that was alive, and she had never wavered from that opinion through 3 decades of the water heater's complaints. I went to bed at 10 o'clock. I lay in the dark and listened to the house being alive around me and thought about nothing in particular for a long time. At 10:47 I was still awake. At 11:12 still awake. At 11:30 I stopped trying to sleep and simply lay with my eyes open in the dark, which was its own kind of rest. Outside, a car moved slowly down Crestwood Lane and turned at the corner and did not come back. A dog barked 2 streets over once and went quiet. Tomorrow night, I told myself. One more ordinary night. Then Thursday. I closed my eyes. Somewhere between 11:30 and midnight without deciding to, I slept. I woke at 5:50 Thursday morning without an alarm, which was not unusual. What was unusual was that I lay in bed for a full 10 minutes before getting up, which was something I had not done on a weekday morning in approximately 30 years. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the house and thought about nothing specific, which was also something I had not done in a while, and which turned out to be exactly the right preparation for the day ahead. Solis called at 8. "Weather's clear," she said. "No rain until Saturday. Reyes confirms the thermal cameras are in position at both neighbor locations. Beverly Holt made her garage available and apparently also offered to make coffee for the deputies, which Reyes says he accepted." "That sounds like Beverly," I said. "The operation goes as planned. Diane and Owen arrive at your house at 2 this afternoon with Rosie and enough boxes and bags to make the return look genuine. They stay visible for at least an hour, unload the car, carry things inside, let the neighborhood see it." A pause. Marcus has been monitoring the GPS. He'll see Diane's location move from Elk Grove to Crestwood Lane this afternoon. That confirms for him that the family is back. And when does she leave? 8 o'clock. She takes the old phone, drives to Paula's, leaves it there. By 8:15, his tracker shows her back in Elk Grove. He'll think she left again. Another pause, shorter. Jean, how are you doing? I'm fine, I said. I know you're fine, she said. That's not what I asked. I looked at the ceiling for a moment. I'm ready, I said. That's closer to the truth. She seemed to accept that. 2 o'clock, she said, and ended the call. They arrived at 2:07, which was close enough. Owen's truck pulled into the driveway, first the bed loaded with the same boxes and bags Diane had packed 10 days earlier, at the beginning of all this. Diane's car followed and parked at the curb. Rosie was out of her car seat and running up the front walk before Diane had fully opened her door, shouting something about the dog next door that I didn't catch, but that made Owen laugh as he came around the back of the truck. I carried boxes in from the driveway for an hour. Owen carried the heavier ones without comment, and at one point, Rosie insisted on helping, which meant she carried a plastic bag containing 2 stuffed animals and a single children's shoe with great ceremony from the front door to the living room and back again twice. Beverly Holt came out to water her roses at 2:30, which she had already watered that morning, and waved at us from across the street for a full minute before going back inside. Carla Navarro passed on her afternoon walk at 3, stopped to say hello, admired the new porch railing, and said something to Owen about the quality of the workmanship that made him stand slightly straighter. It looked exactly like a family coming home, because in every way that mattered it was. At 4 o'clock, I made lemonade, and we sat on the new porch in the late afternoon sun, Diane on the top step, Owen in one of the old lawn chairs I kept against the house, Rosie running barefoot through the grass in the backyard, with the particular purposeful energy of a 4-year-old who has decided that running in circles is a project. I held my glass and watched my granddaughter, and did not say much, and nobody asked me to. At 6, Diane made sandwiches from what was in the refrigerator, and we ate them at the kitchen table, all 4 of us, the way we had eaten together a dozen times over the 3 weeks Owen had been working on the porch. Rosie ate half a sandwich and most of a handful of grapes, and then climbed into my lap without asking, which she always did when she was tired, and sat there with her head against my chest, while the adults talked about nothing in particular. I held her and felt the small, warm weight of her, and thought about a man who had watched this child sleep for 14 weeks through a hidden lens, who had stood in this room in the dark, with a key that was not his to use, who had smiled at a camera he had hidden in a gift he had given. And I thought about all of that calmly, and without any of the rage I had expected to feel, because Rosie was in my lap, and she was safe, and she was real in a way that made everything else very small. At 7:45, Diane stood up from the table. She collected Rosie from my lap, the transfer of a sleeping or near-sleeping child, practiced and smooth, the kind of movement that exists only between parents and grandparents and belongs to no other relationship. She held Rosie on her hip and looked at me across the kitchen. I left the old phone on the counter, she said quietly. Plugged in so the battery's full. The GPS will show it moving when I leave. I know, I said. Owen shook my hand at the back door. His grip was firm and brief, the handshake of a man who has something to say, and has decided that the handshake says it better. I walked them out to the driveway. Diane strapped Rosie into her car seat, moving efficiently in the particular way she moved when she was keeping her emotions in a room with the door closed. Then she straightened up and turned to me. She crossed the driveway in 2 steps and put her arms around me, and I held my daughter in the driveway of the house she had grown up in the last of the Thursday evening light, with the new porch railing gleaming pale behind us, and Helen's roses along the fence starting to close for the night. She did not cry. She held on for a moment longer than a casual goodbye, and then she pulled back and looked at me the way she had looked at me since she was small, like she was checking to make sure I was really there. "Don't do anything stupid," she said. "I never do," I said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Dad, you called Marcus Webb against direct police instructions." "I never do anything stupid twice," I said. That got a real laugh, short and genuine, and she got in her car. Owen followed in the truck. I stood in the driveway and watched both sets of taillights disappear around the corner of Crestwood Lane, and the street went quiet, and the evening air smelled like cut grass, and Helen's roses, and the faint cedar of Owen's new porch boards. I went inside. I locked the back door. I took the earpiece Solus had given me that morning from the kitchen counter and put it in my left ear. Then I turned off every light in the house except the living room lamp on its timer, which came on at 8 as scheduled. At 8:03, Solus's voice came through the earpiece, calm and clear. "We're in position, Gene. All sensors active. Beverly's garage is covered. The Henderson side yard is covered." A brief pause. "How are you doing in there?" I sat in Helen's chair in the dim living room, with the lamp making a small, warm circle of light beside me and the rest of the house in darkness, and I looked at the front window and the quiet street beyond it. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said. The living room lamp came on at 8 o'clock, exactly the way it had been programmed, to casting a small, warm circle on the side table and the arm of Helen's chair, and nothing else. From the street through the front window, it would look the way it looked on any other Thursday evening, a light on in the front room. Someone at home, nothing unusual. I sat in the chair and did not move. At 8:17, Solus's voice came through the earpiece. "Diane's GPS is showing Elk Grove. Marcus will see it within the next few minutes if he checks." A pause. "All positions holding." I said nothing. I had learned over 30 years of a job that required presence without intrusion, that sometimes the right response to a situation is to remain in it quietly and let it develop. The house made its sounds around me. At 9:15, Solus again. "Reyes confirms Beverly's garage is secure. The Henderson side yard is green. Motion sensors, all nominal." Another pause. "You doing okay in there, Gene?" "Fine," I said quietly. "You don't have to whisper. He's not there yet." "I know," I said at normal volume. "Old habit." At 10 o'clock, I heard a car on Crestwood Lane, the particular sound of a vehicle moving slowly, the engine sound dropping as it decelerated. I sat forward slightly in the chair. The headlights crossed the front window and kept moving, and 30 seconds later, I heard the car accelerate away down the block toward Riverside. Not him. A neighbor coming home late. I sat back. At 10:45, I thought about Helen. Not deliberately, she arrived the way she always did in this chair, simply present the way a room can hold the feeling of a person long after the person is gone. I thought about the night Diane was born 34 years ago, when I had sat in a hospital waiting room for 6 hours, because that was what fathers did in those days, and I had been more frightened than I had admitted to anyone. And when the nurse finally came out and said everything was fine, I had stood up too fast and gone lightheaded and had to sit back down. I thought about how small Diane had been, how certain it had felt from the first moment that I would do anything for her. That feeling had not changed in 34 years. It had simply expanded to include Rosie. At midnight, Solus checked in. "All quiet. We're staying focused." The street outside had gone completely still. No cars, no dogs, no lights in any of the neighboring windows. Crestwood Lane at midnight was as quiet as a photograph of itself, and I sat in the middle of it in the dark with a lamp burning beside me and waited. 1 o'clock came and went. I did not check my phone. I had decided sometime around 10 that checking the time was a form of impatience, and impatience was the one thing I could not afford. At 1:44, a sound from outside, not a car this time, but something smaller. A possum crossing the driveway, or a cat from 2 doors down that was always getting through the fence. The motion sensor in the backyard stayed quiet. Not him. At 2:15, I thought about Marcus. Not about what he had done, which I had spent enough time thinking about. I thought about the version of him I had first met, the man who had shaken my hand at Diane's kitchen table 8 years ago, who had been polite and attentive, and had asked careful questions about my years at the Postal Service, as though he genuinely found the work interesting. I thought about how long it took to understand that some people's interest in you is not curiosity. It is reconnaissance. Solace at 2:30. Jean, we're coming up on the window. Stay sharp. I'm sharp, I said. The next hour was the longest of my life, and I have had some long hours. At 3:15, a sound I could not identify, brief, directional from the side of the house near the fence gate. I did not move. The motion sensor stayed quiet. Solace said nothing. Whatever it was passed. At 3:47, Beverly's upstairs light came on. I saw it through the gap in the front curtain, the pale rectangle of her bedroom window going from dark to lit. Beverly did not turn lights on at 3:47 in the morning without a reason. Solace immediately low and precise. Jean, Beverly's light. Reyes is watching. I did not respond. I moved my hand to the arm of the chair and held it there. 30 seconds of nothing. Then Solace again, her voice dropping further. East fence line. Thermals picking up movement. I looked at the dark hallway that led to the kitchen and the back door. Single individual, Solace said, moving along the fence toward the gate. The motion sensor on the back patio stayed silent. That meant whoever it was knew where the sensor was pointed and was staying outside its range. That was not luck. That was preparation. He's at the gate, Solace said. I heard nothing from where I sat. The gate was solid wood, well maintained. Owen had rehung it 3 weeks ago because it had been dragging on the ground. It opened quietly now, the way Owen had intended it to. He's in the yard, Solace said. I took a breath. I let it out slowly. Footsteps across the patio, not hurried, not tentative. The footsteps of someone who had taken this path before and saw no reason to rush. They crossed the patio and stopped at the back door. The sound that followed was very small. A sound that should not have been frightening because it was simply metal against metal. A common sound. A sound that happened at every house on this street multiple times a day. A key touching a lock. Not searching for the keyhole. Not fumbling. Touching it directly with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where it was. Jean. Solace's voice was barely above a breath. Hold your position. The key turned. The back door opened. The door did not creak. Owen had oiled the hinges 3 weeks ago, working through the whole house at my request, and every door in the back of the house now opened and closed without complaint. I had thanked him for it at the time without knowing why I had asked. Now I understood. A door that does not creak tells you nothing about whether it is opening. What told me was the air. The back door opened into the kitchen, and the kitchen was connected to the hallway by an open doorway with no door, and the hallway connected to the living room where I sat. When the back door opened, the air in the house shifted, a slight change in pressure, the particular small movement that a sealed space makes when it is no longer sealed. I felt it on the back of my hands and on the side of my face that was turned toward the hallway. I did not move. Solace in my ear, barely a thread of sound. He's inside. I heard nothing from the kitchen. No footsteps, no breathing, no sound of movement. That was the thing that settled into me then, a cold and particular understanding. He was not making noise because he did not need to practice being quiet in this house. He had been here enough times in his mind, and possibly in fact, that silence came naturally to him here. He moved through my house the way you move through your own in the dark, without thinking, without hesitating. The first footstep I heard was in the hallway. One step, a pause, another step. He was moving at the pace of someone with nowhere to be and all night to get there, past the laundry closet, past the hall bathroom. I counted the steps by memory, 12 from the back door to the mouth of the hallway, another 8 to the point where the hallway branched toward the living room on the left and Rosie's bedroom on the right. At the branch, the footsteps stopped. I sat in Helen's chair with my hands flat on the armrests, and I did not breathe. He turned right. 4 more steps. Slow, unhurried. The footsteps of a man fulfilling a private ritual that no one else knew existed. He reached Rosie's door. The knob turned. The door swung inward on Owen's oiled hinges without a sound. A long silence from Solis. I felt it rather than heard it, the held breath of a room full of people watching a monitor and waiting. Marcus stepped into Rosie's bedroom. I heard nothing for several seconds. Then the sound of footsteps on the hardwood floor of the bedroom crossing from the door to the bed. 3 steps. 4. And then nothing again. He was standing beside the bed. I thought about the training doll lying under the pink blanket, the weighted body, and the soft features, and I thought about the low nightlight still plugged into the baseboard outlet that Solis had said to leave on because Marcus would expect it, and its absence might alert him. In the pale yellow light of that small lamp through a doorway, to a man who had not slept well, and who believed what he had come here to believe, a weighted doll under a blanket was a sleeping child. His voice when it came was very soft, softer than I had expected from a man who filled every room he entered with careful, deliberate presence. It was the voice a person uses only when they believe they are alone. "There you are," he said. 2 words. The particular warmth of 2 words spoken to someone you have been missing. The greeting of arrival, of finding what you came to find. My right hand tightened on the armrest. A pause. The sound of him shifting his weight, leaning closer. "I've been watching over you," he said. "You know that, right, the whole time." Another pause. "Your mother doesn't see it. She never did. She thinks she's protecting you by keeping me away, but she doesn't understand what you need." His voice carried no anger, no bitterness. It carried something worse, the absolute conviction of a man explaining a simple truth. "That man she has working out there, he's not your family. I'm your family. I'm the only one who's always been here." I was standing. I did not remember deciding to stand. I was simply on my feet in the hallway doorway, looking at the thin line of light under Rosie's door. Solis, sharp and immediate in my ear. "Jean, hold. Do not move." I stopped. I pressed my back against the hallway wall. My heart was doing something that had nothing to do with calm or patience or 30 years of learning to deliver mail in all weather without complaint. Marcus again from behind the door. Quieter now, the way a voice gets quieter when it moves closer to something. "Mommy's gone," he whispered. "But I'm here. I'm always going to be here." My hands had closed into fists at my sides without my noticing. "Jean." Solis's voice. Controlled. Precise. The voice of someone who had done this before and knew exactly how the next 90 seconds needed to go. On my mark. From somewhere outside the house, the side yard, the garage across the street, I heard the particular silence that precedes coordinated movement. Not a sound, but the absence of the ordinary small sounds that people make when they are simply waiting. The shift from waiting to ready. 3, Solis said. Behind Rosie's door, Marcus said something else too quiet to hear. 2. I pushed off the wall and moved to Rosie's door and put my hand on the frame. Not on the knob. On the frame. Because Solis had said on my mark and I had told her I would wait, and I was going to keep that promise for exactly 1 more second. 1. The lights came on. Not gradually, not one by one, all of them simultaneously, every overhead fixture in the hallway and Rosie's bedroom blazing to full brightness, in the same instant, the way lightning fills a room and leaves no shadows anywhere. I pushed through the door. Marcus spun from the bed. He was exactly as I had pictured him, and nothing like it, the pressed dark clothing, the careful hair, but his face in the sudden light was something I had not seen before. Not the controlled pleasantness of the interview room, not the warm ease of the phone call. Something stripped of all of that raw and exposed the face of a man whose private world has just become visible to everyone at once. The closet door flew open. Reyes came through first, moving with the compact efficiency of someone who had done this many times, and a second deputy followed immediately behind. From outside, the bedroom window shattered inward as a third officer came through from the side yard, controlled precise the glass pre-scored along the frame for exactly this purpose. Marcus stumbled back against the wall beside the dresser. What? His voice was not frightened. It was confused. Genuinely. Confused, the confusion of a man whose reality has collided with a set of facts he has not yet accepted. What are you doing? You're going to wake her. Get on the ground, Reyes said. Now. You'll scare her. Marcus twisted toward the bed, toward the small shape under the pink blanket, and Reyes moved, and Marcus went down hard onto the bedroom floor, his shoulder hitting the hardwood with a sound I felt in my back teeth. He did not fight. He went down and stayed down, and Reyes had the handcuffs on in under 4 seconds, with the practiced motion of someone who had long since stopped thinking about the individual steps. From the floor, Marcus turned his head toward the bed. The blanket had shifted in the movement of the room. The window coming in, the deputies crossing the floor, and the training doll lay partially exposed, its weighted arm visible, its molded face turned toward the ceiling, with the patient blankness of something that had never been alive. Marcus stared at it. He stared at it for a long time, long enough that the room went quiet around him. The deputies holding position. Solis in the doorway, with her notepad already out, and nobody speaking. He stared at the doll the way a person stares at something that has rearranged every assumption they came in with. That's not... He stopped. No, Solis said. It isn't. Marcus turned his head and looked at me. I was standing in the doorway, where I had put my hand on the frame 30 seconds ago. I had not moved far. There had not been much distance to cross. He looked at me the way he had looked at the one-way glass in the interview room, as though he was calculating something, running numbers, deciding on an approach. But the calculation was slower now. The options were narrower. Jean, he said. His voice had found a version of its usual reasonableness. I was checking on her. I was worried about her. Diane has been making poor choices, and someone needed to. You stood in this room, I said, and you talked to a doll under a blanket. You told it that its mother was gone. You told it that you were always going to be here. He said nothing. You installed a camera in a clock you gave as a gift, I said. You tracked my daughter's location for 8 months after a court told you the marriage was over. You left lies on the internet to destroy the reputation of a decent man. I took 1 step into the room. And 4 years ago, you sat across a kitchen table from me and handed me papers to sign and told me it was for Rosie's future. And I believed you because you were family. Marcus's jaw tightened. I was trying to protect, You were trying to own, I said. There's a difference. And somewhere between the camera and the key and the doll on the floor tonight, I think part of you knows that. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked away. Reyes brought him to his feet. Outside, the blue and red lights of 3 patrol cars were washing across the front of the house through the window glass, moving in slow arcs across the ceiling of Rosie's room and the hallway and every wall. Through the front window, I could see Beverly's porch light on her front door open her outline in the doorway. Across the street, Carla stood at the edge of her lawn in her bathrobe, arms folded, watching. They walked Marcus through the hallway and through the kitchen and out the back door, which was still standing open the way he had left it. I followed as far as the porch. On the new boards Owen had laid, I stood and watched them put Marcus into the back of the nearest patrol car. He did not look back at the house. He sat down, and the door closed, and the car did not move immediately. Paperwork, radio calls, the administrative machinery of an arrest, assembling itself in the pre-dawn dark. Solis came to stand beside me on the porch. "He'll be processed and charged this morning," she said. "Burglary 1, stalking installation of a surveillance device, child endangerment, and the financial fraud charges are coming separately. Andrea Marsh has been waiting for tonight." She paused. "It's a strong case, Jean. Everything we need is already in the record." "Good," I said. We stood there for a moment, in the way that people stand together after something large has ended, and the next thing has not yet begun. The air was cool and smelled like damp grass and exhaust from the patrol cars and faintly cedar from the porch boards. "Go call your daughter," Solis said. I went inside, sat in Helen's chair in the living room, and called Diane. She picked up before the first ring had finished, which meant she had been holding the phone. "Dad." Her voice was very quiet. "Is it over?" I looked around the living room, the lamp still on the family photographs on the shelf. The blue-painted bookshelf Diane had been embarrassed about at 15. The ordinary, resilient 31-year accumulation of a life in one place. "Yes," I said. "It's over." She made a sound that was not quite a word. I heard her breathe out slowly on the other end, a long exhale that seemed to carry something she had been holding for a very long time. "Rosie's asleep," she said finally. "She slept through the whole night." "I know," I said. "That's exactly what she was supposed to do." Through the living room window, the patrol cars were beginning to pull away from Crestwood Lane, their lights going dark one by one as they turned onto the main road. Beverly's porch light stayed on. It always did. The trial lasted 4 days. Marcus pleaded not guilty, which surprised nobody who had been paying attention. His attorney argued compromised accounts, coincidental evidence, a grandfather's paranoia amplified by grief. The jury took 2 hours and 40 minutes to find him guilty on every count: first-degree residential burglary, stalking unlawful installation of a surveillance device, child endangerment, and elder financial abuse. The financial fraud charges Andrea Marsh had been building separately for 3 months, added a 6th conviction before the afternoon session ended. The judge sentenced him on a Thursday morning in late July in Sacramento County Superior Court. I sat in the 3rd row with Diane on my left and Dennis on my right. Owen waited outside in the hallway. Diane had asked him to come, and he had come, and he had understood, without being told, why she needed him in the building, but not in the room. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, addressed the court for 11 minutes before pronouncing sentence. She noted the premeditation. She noted the vulnerability of the victims, a child, an elderly man. She noted that the defendant had used the language of protection and love to describe conduct that was in the court's assessment neither. 8 years. With the financial fraud enhancement, the earliest possible release was 6.5 years out. Marcus, when the sentence was read, looked straight ahead. He did not look at Diane. He did not look at me. He looked at the middle distance the way a man looks when he has decided that whatever is happening around him is not final and that somewhere ahead of him is a version of events that comes out differently. I hope he finds peace with the version that actually happened. Outside the courthouse, Diane took my arm and we walked down the front steps into the July heat without saying much. Dennis fell in beside us. Owen met us at the bottom and fell in on Diane's other side, and the four of us walked to the parking garage together without talking about what had just happened, because there was nothing left to say that the jury had not already said better. By August, the house on Crestwood Lane felt like itself again. Not immediately. There were weeks where every creak of the floor made Diane look up where I caught myself checking the camera feeds before remembering we had replaced the entire system with one installed by a professional Solis had recommended. There were mornings where Rosie woke early and called out, and Diane was in the doorway before the second syllable moving faster than the situation required, which was a kind of damage that takes longer to heal than the kind you can see. But August arrived, and the valley heat settled over Sacramento, the way it always did, heavy and dry and golden. Rosie started at a new preschool 3 mornings a week, and came home with paintings and handfuls of dandelions and strong opinions about which color of cup was correct for apple juice. Solis came by on a Tuesday afternoon, in the second week of August, off-duty, in jeans and a light jacket, carrying a bakery box from the place on Freeport Boulevard that she had apparently remembered from something I had mentioned once. She sat at the kitchen table with Diane and Dennis and me, and drank coffee and did not talk about Marcus or the case. She talked about her mother's garden in Stockton. She talked about a documentary on the California Condor Restoration Program. She ate 2 pieces of coffee cake and complimented the porch railing through the kitchen window. When she left, she shook my hand at the front door. "You did everything right," she said, "from the very beginning." "I delivered mail for 30 years, I said. "You learn to notice when something's off on a route." She laughed the first time I had heard her laugh, and walked down the new porch steps to her car. Dennis called that evening. The trust document had been formally invalidated by the court in June. The clause Marcus had buried in my estate planning no longer existed in any legally binding form. I had met with a different attorney, one I chose myself from a firm on J Street, and we had rewritten everything from scratch. Owen's Google business page had been restored, the fraudulent review removed, and 3 clients who had seen the news coverage called to book work for the fall. He mentioned it to me once in passing and did not mention it again. That was the kind of man he was. On a Saturday morning in the 3rd week of August, I was sitting on the porch in the chair Owen had built solid oak mortise and tenon joints, the kind of construction that outlasts the person who made it, when Rosie came through the screen door in her orange star pajamas. She was carrying something in both hands with the concentrated seriousness of a 4-year-old transporting something valuable. She stopped in front of my chair and held it out. A dandelion. Small, slightly bent at the stem, the yellow head still intact. "For you, Grandpa," she said. I took it with both hands the way you take something being given carefully, the small, bright yellow of it against my palm, the slight imperfection of the bent stem. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. She climbed into the chair beside me, just enough room, if we both shifted and looked out at the yard, with the expression of someone surveying territory she considers her own, which it was. I held the dandelion and listened to the house behind us being lived in Diane's voice from the kitchen. Owen's truck in the driveway, the screen door not quite latching, the way it never quite latched, the second floorboard, doing what it had done for 31 years. Ordinary sounds. Every one of them. I do not think revenge is always about making someone suffer. Sometimes the truest revenge is simply refusing to let what happened define what comes after. Marcus wanted control. He lost his freedom. Rosie kept hers. Diane kept hers. I kept mine. And on that Saturday morning in August, I kept something else too. I kept this. People ask me sometimes what I learned from all of this. I learned that love is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows up at 11 minutes past 4 in the morning with a flashlight and a steady hand, and it checks every room twice. I learned that the most dangerous people are not the ones who act out of hatred. They are the ones who act out of certainty, who have convinced themselves so completely that they are right, that no amount of evidence will reach them. And I learned with God's help, and I mean that simply and without decoration, that an ordinary man can do extraordinary things when the people he loves are depending on him to stay calm. Here is my honest advice, and I say this as someone who made mistakes along the way. Do not wait the way I waited. If something feels wrong in your home, trust that feeling immediately. Change your locks. Check the gifts that were left behind. Do not give your silence to people who have already taken enough. These are Dad's revenge stories, and the quiet ones I have found cut the deepest. If any part of this story stayed with you, leave a comment below and tell me why. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have not subscribed to this channel yet, now is a good time. Thank you for staying until the very end. The stories ahead contain some fictional elements crafted with the sole purpose of shining a light on things worth understanding. If that is not for you, that is completely fine. Step away and find what feeds your spirit better. But if you are staying, I am glad you are here.